Welcome to Certain Point of View's Trade School, where each episode a different host talks about a comic book trade paperback that they loved and why they love it. Hey everyone, I'm Case Aiken, and this is Trade School. Now, if you're familiar with our fellow Certain POV podcast, Fun and Games with Matt and Jeff, you're probably familiar with their sub-series, Side Quests. And this is kind of a sibling series to that. This is a comic book focused show where we're going to discuss comics that are available in trade paperback form. And the goal is, just like Side Quest, to have guests submit whatever their favorite trade paperback that they have emotional attachments to and talk about why. And not just talk about the story, but, talk a little bit about the story, but explain why it's a worthwhile trade for someone to pick up. The idea is that these are accessible books to people. So what did I choose to open the series with? Well, as of recording this, we are a week out from Peter David passing away, and I figured it would be a good opening to give a little bit of thought on Peter David, who is a writer that meant a lot to me. Now, I know he's had some controversial statements in the past, but, also don't speak ill of the dead is sort of a thing there. But he was a very important figure in shaping the comics, especially of the 90s. And so I wanted to talk about a story that came at the tail end of that. So today we're talking about the 2003 closing arc to Peter David's run on Supergirl. And so we are talking about Many Happy Returns. So like I mentioned, this is the last story in the Peter David run of Supergirl. It is the conclusion to the story of Linda Danvers, the Matrix entity Supergirl who became an Earthbound angel. Crazy stuff happened in that book. It was wild. And I think a lot of people tuned in at the beginning of the run, mainly because of the Gary Frank cover on the first issue, which was this iconic shot of Supergirl having her shirt open, or wearing a flannel shirt open, revealing the Supergirl t-shirt underneath. And it was just a very cool looking teenage girl kind of shot. She was holding a skateboard in it. It was really iconic. Not a lot of people stayed for the remainder of the run, though. So this trade collects issues 75 through 80, which again was the finality of the series. Peter David had stayed on for the entirety of the book, but artists came and went. So by the time this arc came out, it had shifted over to Ed Benes, who would go on to be a superstar artist of the early 2000s. When this book came out, I had just recently gone to college, and I was having a hard time being a comic book fan at a school where there wasn't a local comic book shop near where I went. I went to Colgate University, and at the time, this was 2003-ish, when I picked up the trade, there wasn't a comic book shop. And there might be one now. I'm not sure, frankly. But it's a small town, and if there is one, I wouldn't be surprised if it was not long for this world, just because, again, it's a small town, and this is a niche hobby. So I picked up this trade having fallen off my regular consumption of the Supergirl series, just by virtue of the fact that I wasn't able to go to a local comic book shop and buy these throughout the semesters at school. So when I was home, I would pick up a lot of trades and really appreciate those. Many Happy Returns, as a result, is a trade that meant a lot to me at the time. It was one of my lifelines to a hobby that was a passion of mine that I was having a really hard time consuming and taking part in. I didn't have friends at college that were particularly comic book fans either, and so this had become a very internal hobby for me. Many Happy Returns, the trade, was in a lot of ways a return to the Supergirl series after having fallen off, and it was bittersweet knowing that it was the end of what I had really enjoyed overall as a book. But what actually happens in Many Happy Returns? Well, Supergirl meets Supergirl, for the shortest way to explain this. It is a send-up of the original Silver Age, or I shouldn't say original Silver Age, because the original Silver Age Supergirl story is one where Jimmy Olsen wished her into existence by way of a magic totem. But the classic Silver Age Supergirl story of Kara Zor-El being introduced to Superman by way of rocket and coming from Argo City and so forth. That is the story that we are dealing with here. Because at this point, this was the Matrix entity Linda Danvers Supergirl. She had been created during the very end of the John Byrne era as a way of having Supergirl but not having Kryptonians. And this sort of set the tone for what the 90s and 2000s super family would look like, or I should say the 90s super family more so. Because Kryptonians started being reintroduced in the 2000s, shortly after this, actually. But this is sort of a prologue to what would be the trend in the 2000s, because in the 90s they just flat out would not do other Kryptonians. So that's why Superboy is a clone of not actually Superman. In the original continuity, he was a clone of a human and then modified to look like Superman. Likewise, Supergirl was based on Lana Lang's DNA, if I remember correctly. She thought that she was Lana Lang, and then she found out that she was actually a protoplasmic entity that was able to shapeshift and had all kinds of powers and so forth, and happened to have a form that she enjoyed taking, which was Supergirl, and looked just like the classic Supergirl that we were all familiar with. Anyway, this character existed for a while. She's really confusing to a lot of people. I love talking about how confusing she is. But when Peter David took over, started Supergirl, the series, he decided to simplify things by way of making things way more complicated. So Supergirl fused with a human girl named Linda Danvers. And in the story, Linda Danvers was a troubled youth. And so this like fusion of a sinful human with this like pure protoplasmic, like innocent creature that was the Supergirl entity, created an earthborn angel in the story. And that was weird. And so for a while, that was the status quo with Supergirl, that she was an angel and had like flaming wings and could shoot fire from her eyes, in addition to being psychokinetic and being able to go invisible and being super strong. Anyway, that all eventually got sorted out because while there were avid fans of the series, it had a hard time being accessible to people. And so by the point that Many Happy Returns comes along, the book had done a lot to try to be a very accessible book. And in fact, this arc was not intended to be the swan song of the series. It was intended at the start of it to be a shot in the arm, to breathe new life into the series, by way of having a much more standardized Supergirl. The angel element had been removed and had technically gone off to be its own thing. And then Linda Danvers was left, but with the powers of Supergirl, which was flight, super strength, 9 vulnerability, and psychokinetic abilities, like I alluded to. So that Supergirl then encounters apparently the Silver Age Supergirl in the story, because of timey-wimey reality stuff, and goes on to have an adventure with her before ultimately sending her back to her own reality to allow Crisis on Infinite Earths to happen and all that. It was a lot of fun, and it gets cited sometimes as being okay. So this is the one where while our Supergirl, the Linda Danvers Supergirl, is in the Silver Age continuity, she ends up in a relationship with Clark, and they have a joke in there where he encounters pink kryptonite, and all of a sudden he becomes more interested in Jimmy. This is that one. This is where that panel comes from that people sometimes rip on Superman for, because they actually have a canonical instance of pink kryptonite and that made him gay. It's, again, Peter David has said some stuff and has put some stuff in his books that, don't hold up very well. I thought it was whatever as a joke at the time. But the rest of the series is really good. The art is really good. It does end up being an effective send off to the book. Although it does feel too short in a lot of ways. But it looks really good. Like I said, the art's fantastic. The story flows really well. It's designed to be new reader accessible, because it was supposed to be a shot in the arm story arc that was to breathe new life into the series. And while it didn't ultimately breathe that new life into the series, it did send it off with a really good capstone. I really enjoy the Peter David Supergirl series, and it is unfortunate that it is so difficult to engage with in the context of the larger Superman fandom, because the 2000s rendition of Kara Zor-El has so thoroughly erased the memory of Linda Danvers as this weird like side story in the Supergirl progression of things. But yeah, this is like I said, this is just a really fun book that I think anyone could hop into without much information. I mean, aside from needing to understand that there's two Supergirls in this, and that like if you go in with an open mind, the book catches you up pretty quick on all the characters, including the main character, who in theory you've been a reader of, but because this again was intended to be a hey, let's get new readers story arc, it is very open to people coming on and sort of understanding it all. So, in conclusion, I think that this is a really fun trade paperback. Nowadays, people are more likely to read the story on the DC Universe Infinite app, which is fine. The issues are up there. I did check that before coming to record this, and by check that before, I mean I paused and went over to the app to look at it. But you are able to read the Supergirl run by Peter David, and I would encourage people to check it out. If nothing else, check out the Many Happy Returns arc, which again is issues 75 to 80 of the Peter David Supergirl series from the late 90s and into the 2000s. And that is that's the story. That's what I wanted to talk about today. And that is what this series is about. This series is supposed to be talking about your love of a particular story and why you care about it. So on that note, this is an open call for people to submit what is a trade paperback that meant something to you and why. So on that note, please reach out. You can find me on most platforms at Case Aiken, except for Instagram, where I'm holding on for dear life to my AIM screen name from high school, which is Quetzalcoatl5. But yeah, you can find me at most platforms. And in this case, reach out to me on our Discord server or on Blue Sky, for example, and I'd happily connect and share the info in terms of getting an episode posted here if you wanted to. But if you just want to tune in, I encourage you to come back next time. But until then, happy reading.
Hey.
Oh, hey, Jeff.
What's going on, guys?
Oh, talking about Superman.
Oh, cool. I could talk about Superman.
I could talk some more about Superman.
We know.
I'll bet a few people would want to get in on this.
I'm down.
You know it.
That sounds like fun. I'll do it.
Cool, let's do it. We can call the show Men of Steel.
And you can find it at certainpov.com.
Or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yay.
CPOV.
CertainPOV.com.